Hey everybody, and welcome back to Parkitect campaign mode. And today, I clicked on the airplane, so that's still circling around. But today I'll be working on Coral Caldera, which is one of the scenarios which I made, and it's over here in Coral Island. And basically the story is that some rich guy managed to purchase the island and wants to turn it into a theme park. So this is the first out of many island scenarios, I think, in the game. If I remember correctly, I can already see a bit more of an archipelago forming over here. But it'll be a bit of a theme, I think. But this being the first and one with the largest amount of space in terms of land, I think. It's quite a large empty map, and you can really do a lot of things with this island. So it's been really interesting for me to see what people have been doing to this scenario. I've seen lots of people building. Actually, not that many people, but my original intention was, for instance, to give you some space to maybe build a coaster all around the park, or just stick to the valley inside the island. Lots of interesting ways in which you can use the natural terrain which you have in the scenario. But to be quite honest, I didn't really think about how I would tackle the scenario myself. What I do know, though, is that it has a bit of a tropical theme to it, as you can see. So I do want to stick to that. And the goals are pretty simple, so there shouldn't be too much of a challenge unless the weather or the amount of guests that we're going to be generating are going to be additional challenges. So without further ado, let's get into the scenario and see what we can make of it. So the map itself is really quite simple. It's just a round-shaped caldera with some hills on the sides and then an empty plain in the middle. Because essentially a caldera is just a crater left behind by a volcano, and in this case it's one that's in the middle of the sea. I was inspired by Aogashima in Japan, which funnily enough is part of the Tokyo metropolis, but it's far out from Japan actually. But yeah, it's just a really beautiful island, and I thought it'd be an interesting setting for a scenario. There really isn't too much else on this. We have a little boathouse over here, which is where people are arriving. So normally you'd have a guest spawn point somewhere on the edge of the map, but obviously since this is an island, they're coming from some kind of building. In this case, where ideally the boats would be arriving. And then there's a little lighthouse on the edge of the island as well, because I couldn't stop myself from building that. But yeah, the map itself, as in the actual park borders that you get, is all empty. And yeah, basically very good land to build whatever you want to, in whatever theme you want to. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. Alright, now the selection of rides that we get from the start is extremely limited, so I will be doing some research, but for now there's not a lot of stuff that I can work with, and I wanted to start off with some kind of roller coaster with a decent intensity rating, to at least attract some guests into the park and give them something to do, and pretty much the only thing I could do anything with is the Wild Mouse coaster. And because I didn't want to make a standard Wild Mouse for the third time in a row, I decided to build something a little bit like a Gerstlauer bobsled coaster. And for the uninitiated, a bobsled coaster is not, as the name suggests, an actual bobsled coaster, but it's a sort of variation on the Wild Mouse by Gerstlauer, which has more banked turns and much more interesting layouts, I think, with airtime hills and sort of spread out layouts. A really interesting coaster type, and definitely one of my favorites when it comes to really small coasters. So that's the kind of thing that I decided to build over here. Hence you can see that it has some of the typical characteristics of a Wild Mouse coaster, like the tight hairpin turns and many block breaks along the ride and those small cars. But at the same time you get these airtime hills like over here, and I was trying to figure out how to get back to the station with an interesting track, and what kind of brake run I had to build to actually be able to go over some of the earlier parts of the track. And I also discovered, and this I think is not supposed to be in the game, that with the new autocomplete feature you can make brakes that have like a slope going up and down, which I don't think you're supposed to be able to build those kinds of things. But that said, I'm also not complaining, because it's pretty awesome actually. That stuff actually has a lot of uses. But yeah, and eventually I figured out how to get back into the station. These coasters typically end with a little helix, and the only real problem that I ran into is that the Wild Mouse coaster in-game, because it is a Wild Mouse coaster and not based on the Gerstlauer bobsled, it doesn't allow for a lot of banking, so I had to make sure that the curves that I did take and wanted to bank are somewhat slow. So I'm sort of trying to keep that in mind with the layouts. The maximum degree of banking on this coaster I think is 15%, something like that. So really not as much as the real-life Gerstlauer bobsled coaster, so there's a bit of a difference there. In any case, I thought the station building for this coaster would be a really interesting sort of entrance building. It's not quite an entrance building because obviously the people are already in the park, but it's a nice sort of symmetrical shape to have the people go through some kind of building before they really enter the rest of the park. And it's also a good time to sort of test the theme that I wanted to try for this park. Because even though it's based on a Japanese island, it doesn't really have a Japanese theme. And I figured it might be fun to try a sort of Polynesian style theme. If you've been familiar with my Koali Beach series in Planet Coaster, with the Lady Designer and Corrales and Rudy Renkamel. The style is very similar to that, I think, mostly inspired actually by that series. So lots of thatch roofs and dark wooden pillar constructions and a very tropical atmosphere overall. And I think it works out pretty well actually with the elements in the game. There isn't really strictly any Polynesian theming in Parkitect, but just because you're able to recolor and sort of repurpose so many items so much, I think it's pretty easy to do this kind of thing if you just get the right roof color and get the right color for the wooden pillars and just kind of go from there. So yeah, essentially these are all just thatch roofs being held up by simple wooden framework. I'm doing the same sort of thing as I did with the western map in terms of letting the pillars stick out from the roof a little bit and having them be a little bit more toward the middle of a tile to make it look as if the roof is really an overhanging roof when really all of them are perfectly placed on the grid. So I think that same style works out quite nicely over here as well. At first I wanted to try to make this a little bit more inspired by Indonesian theming, but then again I feel like the last time when Dutch people tried to force Indonesian architecture into some kind of Indonesian setting, that didn't really work out very well, to say the least. And yeah, in my case I couldn't really figure out anything quite with the scenery pieces either, so I'm sort of keeping it, you know, generically tropical and that kind of whole part of the world, so it's not really referring to any kind of particular country or anything. I did like the sort of tunnel that we've got going there from the entrance of the park, where you do have a sort of overhanging roof with some of those more hangar style roofs, which even though they're metal plates, if you recolor them to a brown color, I think it looks pretty good as a sort of wooden or maybe even bamboo sort of texture. And because these roofs can be placed off-grid, it's actually a really good piece for overhanging roofs, so that's definitely something to remember, and also a little trick that I will be doing again at some later point in the scenario or some future scenarios as well. Now as for the rockwork and the foliage and all of that, it's pretty similar to what I've been doing so far, but I definitely want to focus more on foliage. You know, the more tropical you go, I feel, the more foliage you generally get, so I'm gonna put a lot of shrubbery in this park, and a lot of very green shrubbery, quite a bunch of flowers, and some brownish rocks. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it should work out with the sort of theme of this being a volcano. I hope it's at least a dead volcano, because the real caldera that this is based on is actually still an active volcano, and I don't know if building a theme park inside of an active volcano is the best idea. But then again, I think that thing hasn't exploded in over 200 years, so that's decent, I guess. But yeah, I'm just gonna assume that this caldera is not gonna erupt anytime soon. So moving into the rest of the park, I don't really have any good coasters to build. I have the junior coaster, but God knows I've been building that one for every single episode. So I'm gonna stay off that one for today. So I'm just gonna build a few flat rides here in the meantime while we get some more stuff in research, hopefully. And just get a good selection of rides before I'm able to open the park and just kind of see what the guests think of it. Because I do always want to get a pretty good start for the park before I actually open it to the guests. And hey, if I work really hard, I might even be able to reach that goal of doing everything within year 2, but probably not. So here goes for the wave swing. I don't actually know, chair swing I should say. I don't actually know what the thing is called in game, but you know what ride this is. Everybody knows this ride, and it's just a nice sort of entrance ride. I think this is one of those rides that you really want to put on display. Hence why I put it on half a tile height from the paths. Just because it's one of those rides which are really nice to look at. At least I always like looking at these rides. I think it's similar to the carousel, for instance, very much a sort of part of the scenery as much as it is a ride. So over here, I think it's time for a food court, and this park is a little bit different from a lot of the other parks. There isn't really any kind of direct connection to the depot, but there is already a pre-built transport tube going into the park for all kinds of deliveries and trash. So I'm just going to connect to that and build my food courts over here. There should be enough space behind this whole place to build some backstage areas with a small extra depot and a staff room, so that's pretty much what I'm gonna do. I also quite like the colors on the umbrellas. I don't know, it feels pretty tropical just because of these settings, because otherwise I feel like green and red would be extremely Christmassy. But yeah, I'm also trying to keep very much a sort of color scheme of very warm colors, so green and red and orange and all of those kinds of colors I think should work out pretty well for this scenario. So here we go with a Enterprise ride, which is honestly one of my favorite flat rides. I really like these things, so I feel like whenever I have one of them in a scenario, might as well place it. It's a pretty good ride from a game perspective as well, pretty high intensity. Definitely one of the better flat rides to get, and a good way to make the people who want intense rides not so angry. So always good to have one of these in your park. And same here, I did want to change the color scheme a little bit to some warmer colors and make it quite bright and vibrant. You know, this is a very tropical map, so might as well keep the colors all very saturated, I think. And over here it's time for the real food court, and fittingly we have some Chinese food, which I guess, you know, we're sort of in an Asian area, so that's gonna have to do, unfortunately. And some bubble tea for all of you hipsters out there. But hey, it's gonna keep guests hydrated and not too hungry, so that's gonna do. And then some umbrellas, because even though I haven't unpaused the game yet, I feel like it might be getting pretty rainy at some point. I also just noticed it's 30 degrees in the park, so it really is a very warm climate in here. So I think at the very least, the theme that I'm going for really fits the area where it might be in real life. So yeah, here we go. Just a simple food courts with a few stalls, not too special really. And at the back of this, there's this sort of empty space with a lot of good space for some backstage areas. But I'll be coming back to that later. For now, I wanted to add one more ride before we go into before we go into a little bit of a test of the park and open it up to guests. And it's gonna be a carousel. I just wanted to finish the pathways over here real quickly, give them a little bit more detail before I moved into that part. But yeah, I wanted to place a carousel over here as another sort of ride to gawk at, really at a sort of central position in the park. And I'm not quite sure what I'm gonna do around this. I want to have more sort of rides that weave together and have interaction with each other, but so far I pretty much just have flat rides, and then I have the junior coaster left, but you know I don't really want to do anything with that yet, so I'm not quite sure how much I'm going to expand. I might need to do more research before I expand into the park much more, because I want to avoid, you know, making the park just a plane with a bunch of flat rides in it. You know, that can work, and it can look nice if you add a lot of detail, but I'd like to make it a little bit more interesting, give it some more depth. And then over here, just to fill up this space and add an extra building, this is going to be a small toilet building, and it's also going to have a vending machine, because we're not too far away from the food courts, but might as well put vending machines everywhere, I think. You know, the more I'm looking at the chair swing, the more I'm feeling like I might make it green. I'm not sure. Like, maybe something like turquoise or something like that. I just feel like the blue is a little bit too cold for the park. but I'll think about that later. Color schemes are just one of these things where you can always sort of keep working on it and keep changing little things until it's exactly the way you want it to be. Anyway, I decided to move into this little corner here, build a small hut or something, I don't know. I didn't quite know what to really do with it. I just felt like I needed some kind of small building there to counteract the toilet and vending machine building. And get some more thatch roofs up in here, because these roofs are actually looking pretty nice. Even though they're just standard roofs with a sort of thatchy color to them, it works out surprisingly well, I think. So that's pretty much the basic structure of the park so far. Not quite sure how I'm going to expand it from here, but it should be pretty much functional, especially now that we finally have the stall room, or the staff room, there we go, and the depot. Everything should be getting pretty functional, and now it's just time to start unpausing the game and see if this park can actually run some profits, or if I'm gonna have to take another loan and build more stuff to actually fix it. I'm not quite sure, but we'll see how that works out. Alright, so let's go to a quick real-time section. Alright, I think it's good that I'm doing this overview because I decided to redo a few things about the Wild Mouse coaster here. So I added an extra block break over here, which used to be a little dip, basically, and added 2 extra cars onto the circuit. So I could add 1 extra car because there's an extra block break, but really the problem that I was running into is that because the length of the blocks was uneven, so the final block over here is much longer in duration than the other blocks, the cars would always get stuck on this block break over here because it would always take so long for the next car to finish this whole block over here that they'd have to wait. So that was a bit of a problem. Like, really, you always have to make sure that all of your block sections are at least somewhat similar in length, or you get cars that get stuck on block breaks. So that was basically the problem, and because of that, and the fact that I have 2 block breaks at the end, I could add 2 more cars, and now it's actually a perfectly efficient and super smoothly running machine. So you'll be able to tell that there's always 1 car on the block breaks over here waiting for the station to empty out, and then if we hide the scenery like this, you can see that there's always 1 car unloading and 1 car loading. So that's pretty much the maximum efficiency you can get, and as soon as another car enters the block breaks over here, the next car can move into the station again. So I don't think I could make this much more efficient. It actually works really well this way, and the throughput is pretty amazing, and the profits, I think this dip is right around the time where I closed it down to work on it for a little bit, so that's why the revenue over here is lower for these months. But you can pretty much see that after changing it, the revenue is higher than it used to be. So this turned out to be sort of an accidental little scientific experiment to see how much, you know, more money you can make just by making your block sections more efficient. So that's one thing. Other than that, I'm not really running into too many problems, just some vandalism issues again. As always, there's a lot of vandalism. It's not really too bad, but it's definitely to the extent where I feel like an extra security and an extra mechanic guy are gonna be necessary. And that aside, I think it's again partly because there's not a great selection of rides. I should probably focus a little bit more on intense rides again. But that shouldn't be too much of a concern, I think. So far, I'm doing pretty well, I think. And I decided to research roller coasters, so we have a little bit more. But to be honest, the inverted coaster isn't exactly what I was looking for, and the powered coaster isn't exactly my favorite. I still have the extra twister flat ride, which I could put somewhere, so that helps. And a pirate ship somewhere. But in terms of the calm rides, there's not too much left either. So yeah, pretty limited when it comes to the kinds of rides that I'll be able to build. But I mean, I'll see what I can do with it. I don't think I'm gonna make the optional goal of doing it within year 2. That's definitely not gonna happen. I do want to make the most of the park here. But yeah, doing pretty well. So let's start working on some stuff again. Alright, so I decided to give myself the challenge of building a B&M inverted coaster in the end, which is a little bit more expensive and difficult to build than the other coasters, but I think it's also much more rewarding. And I'm going for a sort of terrain conforming coaster, very heavily inspired by Nemesis in Alton Towers, just because I think that works really nicely with the natural terrain of the Caldera that we have over here, where the lift hill just sort of follows the hill and then you kind of come down from there. But then there's also the sort of low-lying area next to the station where you're going through all of the bigger inversions. And when I say that it's a bit more of a rewarding coaster, I think there's a bit of a risk attached to it as well. That being that I ended up spending quite a lot of time trying to get the layouts to be right, especially because the space over here is really limited. So I had to shuffle things around every now and then to make sure that stuff would actually fit. So you'll see me, have a lot of sections where I just can't really figure out how to work my way around the elements, and then just kind of delete some stuff or move the entire coaster around until it works. I've gotten some comments about, how it looks as if I do everything very easily and right away on the time-lapse without really having to think much about it. But sometimes that isn't really the case, as is over here. I think it took quite a bit of trial and error to get this layout to be right. But yeah, in the general spirit of Nemesis, I wanted to have a similar feeling layout, very terrain conforming layout, beginning with a corkscrew and then sort of meandering down the hill into a 0G roll, which up until that point is very much a sort of similar layout to Nemesis. And then it does a bunch of stuff and ends with a loop somewhere near the end of the track. But sort of getting these elements in the right order was a bit of a challenge. So I kept trying to fit a 0G roll right behind the station for a while. But in the end I figured it might be better to have it go over the station and sort of go into the other direction, because this opens up a little bit more space and, allows me to also actually build some paths and some queues, which are going to be necessary as well. And then finally sort of curve back with this helix into the other area. For a while I was thinking that it might be possible to go even lower than the other sections and sort of have the loop somewhere near the station, low below the ground, but really that didn't end up working all too well. The space over here is super limited, and there's also the lake nearby, and I didn't want to create a deep canyon right next to the lake, because that, I don't know, might look a little bit weird. So this plan didn't really end up working after all, because there's just not really enough space to make this kind of thing work. Never mind that I have to get back to the station as well, and I would have no idea how to get back to the station from there. So I ended up sort of choosing a slightly different route, just pretty much going along the same sort of straight axis to the back of the park. And this means that I am using up a lot of space in the park, so this definitely narrows down the amount of things that I can still do, but at the same time it works out so much better for the inverted coaster, so I think it's probably for the best to build the layout like this. And again, I'm using this trick a lot, where you sort of disconnect some track pieces and then reconnect them in a single piece using the auto connect feature to make things more smooth. And I think this is especially useful when you're trying to, transition between two curves at maybe different heights, so you can get a sort of smooth banking transition, but also very handy at the end of the track, for instance, what it's actually supposed to be for, where you connect up to the brake run, which might be a little bit lower than the track section that you're trying to connect to it. So all around, super handy trick. And I also have to say, I've gotten some questions if I want to make a sort of Parkitect coaster college, similar to Planet Coaster College, about the coaster builder. And I don't know how much I've actually said about this in videos, but I've been thinking about this for sure. So I would like to do this sometime soon. It's not going to be a very complicated video, I think, since really the coaster builder is pretty easy to understand. So I'm going to keep it quite simple. I should also say, I know a dear friend of mine who's also been doing something similar, so once the time comes I'll also link his video down in the description, but so far I'm gonna keep that one a secret until I really work out what I'm gonna do with my video. But yeah, I'm gonna do something like that for sure, and one of my major talking points is definitely going to be, how this sort of auto connect feature can help you build some slightly smoother coasters or get you out of a pinch if you've got your coaster stuck somewhere. Anyway, let's try to, get up to speed with the video again. So I've built a small teacups ride over there. I'm definitely going to want to look at the color scheme again because it's still pink and blue and it doesn't really fit the theme too much. But yeah, it's a flat ride that fits really well over there. It sort of rounds up this corner of the park, gives you something else to go to this corner of the park for, and it's something under a roof as well, which is always fun to build and pretty handy. And then the station building has the exit coming out over here, which I know is a grave sin because the exit is much more obvious than the entrance. But I just wanted to have a wide wooden bridge sort of go over that valley where the coaster dives underneath it, and then have the station right next to it. Which is, you know, almost I just hit my pop filter. I hope you didn't hear too much about that. But it's always fun to sort of have things go on top of each other and underneath each other. Definitely something I liked doing a lot in Roller Coaster Tycoon. You know, the more you can get coaster track and paths and all kinds of scenery to sort of be layered and stacked on top of each other, it just makes stuff more interesting than if everything were just on a single flat one-dimensional plane. So I don't know, I just like doing stuff like that. So there's the bridge, pretty nice, with the coaster going underneath it, but also above it with the station right next to it. So that's pretty much what I want out of a coaster in Parkitect. And the rest of the scenery is all going to be quite simple. I'm not going to do too much just yet, because I do want to give a bit of a real-time update very soon again. But I just want to finish off the queue and add a bit of scenery to it. So the queue itself is pretty simple, not really too many, you know, cattle pens or anything like that. It's just sort of making its way through the landscape and having a lot of interaction with the coaster track as well, which is always nice. And then there's just some path elements just to fill up this space, because it's quite open and there's not really enough space to put anything in particular, like a ride or some stalls or anything like that. So I'm just gonna, you know, add decorations until it's all filled up. Sometimes you can really just add a small pavilion with some benches underneath it or something like that. It's something that quite a lot of real-life theme parks will have as well. And it's just a really good way to fill up the empty little spaces that you might have scattered around your park. So yeah, that's basically it when it comes to that. And then with some final bits of foliage, we arrive at a quick real-time overview, and I'll show you how everything's working. Alright, so I just completed the goal of having 400 park tickets sold, so that's really nice. So now, if all is well, I should have the steel coaster over here, and there we go. That's pretty awesome. And the rest of these coasters are still the same. I'm researching thrill rides again because I don't think I'll really need more coasters. I can probably finish it with, well, the steel coaster, I suppose, or maybe a small powered coaster after all. But I like to focus on the thrill rides instead, because if I just keep this park going, I'll get to 800 guests eventually anyway. So that shouldn't be too much of a concern. And also, I just saw that I'm getting the Topple Tower, which is a super interesting flat ride. I really like these things. They're really rare in the real world. They're a bit uncomfortable. Definitely one of the weirdest flat rides that I've ever been on. But I don't know, they're really interesting. It's cool to see them in the game. You'll see them in a little bit. Also, I got a comment on the last video that I should probably give some, well, not POVs of the coasters, but at least follow them from the sort of off-topic or the off-ride perspective that you get in the game. So I think that's a really cool idea. So let's just do that real quick. I'm gonna have to remove that tree, actually. I just realized. Some of these trees, it doesn't really have much of a hitbox for, so it can, you know, run into stuff, and it was definitely hitting that tree, which might be a little bit uncomfortable for the people riding the coaster. But yeah, here we go. You do have that sort of camera which can follow the coaster along. And again, like I've said earlier, I don't really, oh, that transition is so smooth. I don't really, that one too. But yeah, I don't really want to do any real on-ride POVs, which you can do with mods, because I feel it kind of breaks the isometric immersion perspective of the game. And god, there's more trees to fix over there. So let's get out of here and remove some of these trees, because that's definitely not a great thing. So this one, and then, yeah, these trees over here. That's definitely a problem. Alright, I think the rest is more or less fine. Maybe this just in case. I'll definitely do more scenery here and there once you know, this whole area around it is finished. The queue still needs some coverings as well, and you know, other kinds of little details scattered around. but the basics are here. And you know, for the hell of it, let's just follow this thing along as well. And I'm not quite sure what terrain the thing chooses. Yeah, it's just kind of going around. Alright, let's follow this train. Or car, I should really say. So yeah, here the people are happily going along the track. And as you can see, it's not really the most smooth thing ever. The inverted coaster is definitely a lot smoother, but I think it works alright. It's a wild mouse coaster after all. And into the airtime hills, which are my favorite parts. And in real life on these coasters as well, they're really fun. I think their heads bumped into the catwalks, but whatever. I'm gonna keep those around. They look way too nice. But yeah. You can see that at this point there should definitely be more banking, but for that as well, I'm just gonna forget about it. And there we go. That nice little drop down into the station, very subtle, but I really like it. That's super cool. It's also nice how like smoothly you sort of move in and out of these views, because it just kind of sticks to a car, but as soon as you scroll out and move around, you get snapped out of that sort of position. So pretty cool. Overall, I am quite happy with how the park is turning out so far. And honestly, I'm not too sure what else I could really build. I'm already running out of space. So I'm probably gonna maybe try to fit in a small flat ride over here. And I've already tried to measure that out, but it doesn't really work out too well. Maybe a twister might work, but then I need to get some kind of one tile path that sort of, you know, narrowly wraps itself around the flat ride. So that might not work out too well. But I definitely want to loop around to this side of the lake and maybe have a small water ride or some flat rides along this side. And if there is money and time and space for another roller coaster, I could probably build a station over here and see wherever that thing is going. But that said, I'm not sure if I can really, build a roller coaster around the entire island. And to be fair, that would also be a little bit ridiculous. It wouldn't be quite realistic, and I do like to keep these parks at least somewhat realistic. But that said, another terrain conforming coaster that sort of wraps itself around these hills would be really cool as well. So let's move on and go back into the time lapse. Alright, so forget about the idea of building a terrain conforming coaster. That didn't really work out too well, but there's still plenty of interesting flat rides to stay around for, I think, and one of them is the Topple Tower over here. So I've mentioned this before, and it is a really kind of a weird flat ride. There's nothing that kind of does the same thing. Basically what it does, it just raises you to the top of that tower, and then the tower starts wiggling back and forth and rotating. It's a very strange experience, but it basically just pushes you into the overhead restraints that you get, which is a little bit uncomfortable, definitely for me being a man down there, but it's very interesting. It's a super unique ride, and you don't see too many of them in the world, so it's cool to see it in the game as well. So I'm building this alongside the water area, because what I did notice for the one that I rode, which is, I forgot the name of the park, but it's the same park where you have Piraten in Denmark. But the way that you sort of built these things in a nice way, I suppose, is by having some kind of area around it, which is nice to sort of, fall towards. So I know the one in Denmark had some water around it and some fountains there that you would sort of, go down and then be raised up again when you're almost getting there. Not quite, but it's at least an interesting sort of surrounding to tip into. So that's that ride, and then we have the good old trusty twister over here on the side as well. And that's a ride you can always count on. It's always pretty cheap and pretty small, and it just fits into every single park, so there's no reason not to build it, really. And in this case, it fills in the space between the Topple Tower and the inverted coaster quite nicely. And for the rest of this space, I didn't really want to build any more flat rides. I definitely wanted to have some sort of a more transitional area with some toilets and a bit of an outlook over the pond that we have over here. I don't know if you can really call it a lake. It's pretty small, I suppose. But yeah, it's a sort of relaxing back part area of the park with mostly just benches. I'm placing a lot of tall fences over here because, again, it's super close to the inverted coaster, and I wouldn't want anybody to jump over the fences and try to pick up a hat or something and get decapitated by the coaster, so putting quite a tall fence over there. Yeah, that actually happened, I remember, at some point with Batman the Ride, which is super tragic, and part of that is the reason why there are such tall fences very often where you get close to coaster tracks. I know Nemesis, actually no, not Nemesis. Nemesis actually as well has super tall fences around the queue line, etc. But Black Mamba in Phantasialand, I also remember for being one of these B&M inverts with really tall fences and very good, protection everywhere. And it's nearly impossible to get anywhere near the coaster in that coaster, even though the queue line and the paths get super close to the layout. So especially for B&M inverts, that's something that I like to keep in mind because, I don't know, these coasters are low-key dangerous from an off-ride perspective. Now over here I am building a small sort of Bali-like temple based on these Indonesian temples that you find in Bali, and I have to be completely honest, I'm not an expert when it comes to this kind of architecture, and also we don't really have, the pieces that you need to make this kind of thing. But just stacking a bunch of triangles with the right shade of brown on top of each other with a few details here and there, I think more or less works, and it gets the idea across. These things kind of look like pagodas, but they're more made out of bamboo, I believe they are. In any case, I'm just sort of trying to recreate the shape. I definitely want to go there one day. I have never been to Indonesia, and I would definitely love to visit it one day. But yeah. Just building this over here because I think it fits really well. I know I've said before that I might put a flat ride in this space, but that really didn't work out. That was too complicated of a puzzle to try and solve, and it really wouldn't make too much sense either. I think this is a pretty good place for just some sort of scenery backdrop and some places where you can just sit on a bench and sit back and look at the roller coasters or something like that. So I'm making this more into a sort of scenic overlook part of the park. And then over here on this corner, which is more or less empty, I think this is a good space for some flat rides. So I put the top spin over there, so that'll be a pretty good start. I'm not really going to add too much scenery to this top spin compared to some of the other top spins I've built, just a very simple log backdrop. Doing the same thing as I did with the Western, I think I built a top spin there, actually I didn't, but doing the same sort of log wall made out of separate pillars, just with a different type of wood this time. And then some very basic decorations around it. I think with some of the freedom that you get in terms of where you put scenery pieces, it is very possible to sort of dress up flat rides in ways in which you want to sort of add some things here and there. So I'm just keeping it very simple here, but definitely with some of the pillar pieces and some of the basic shapes that we get, you can actually do a lot of experimentation with giving flat rides a different skin. And over here, I think it's called the top scan, but I'm actually not entirely sure. Let me look up what that thing is called again. But yeah, I'm putting up the star shape. That's it, actually. The star shape ride, which is one of those things which I've personally never been on because I've always pussied out on these things, and I should definitely go on one of these one day. But yeah, there's this thing that goes upside down and the seats are rotating, and the seats are also on a rotating circle. It's one of these things with so many moving parts that I'm just afraid that it would make me super nauseous. But from a game perspective, it has a high intensity rating and a pretty high excitement rating and nausea rating as well. So it's pretty good for the park. And honestly, at this point, I'm just trying to fill in stuff, because really, if I just keep the park running, I'm going to get the 800 tickets sold pretty soon, and the guests are more than happy with the park, so that'll be fine. I just want to make sure that I'm filling up all of the parts of the Caldera and, getting a decent amount of rides in the park. And I think with the amount of flat rides that I have right now and the amount of coasters, it's pretty much fine. Another reason that I didn't want to build another coaster is that I felt like for the size of the park, 2 coasters is pretty much all you need. So, there's a family coaster and there's a more intense coaster, and we don't really need too much else considering how small the park is after all, since I haven't really gone out of the Caldera. And finally, there's a bunch of stuff that I just want to slightly improve, and I forgot to record some things here, so I'm gonna have to put some commentary over some things that I don't show yet, but I'll show that in a quick real-time section as well. So I decided to dress up the queue a little bit more for the inverted coaster, and also add some catwalks to it. And I'm not going to add catwalks to every coaster that I do, but for some of the more themed ones where you can sort of get a catwalk that fits the theme as well, like over here with the sort of bamboo and wooden planks look of the coaster, I think that works out quite alright. Okay, so let's go back to a real-time overview. And there we go, that's the park. And it's working pretty alright, I would say. I'm having more staff than I used to for the previous scenarios, but even still, I think I could use a bit more staff. But overall, looks like it's fine, no vandalism or anything like that. Some of the rides are making crazy money, like the inverted coaster is looking like the most profitable coaster of the entire playthrough so far. And the little ride over here is not doing too badly either. And then all of the flat rides are pretty much fine as well. And at the moment, we can't look at the Topple Tower yet because it's still waiting to load new people, but it's looking absolutely insane. So just a little bit more until we actually get the goal and until we get the next scenario. And oh god, we're gonna get this in the rain, I suppose. So it's interesting how many things actually break down in the rain. So some of the smaller rides, some of the more gentle rides and less tall rides will still be functioning, but then all of the tall stuff breaks down. Alright, so there we go. We did it. We didn't do it in year 2, but year 3 is actually not too bad, considering I think I completed the last scenario in year 6 or 7. So I guess I'm improving. And we're gonna wait for this thing, but before we do that, I kind of feel like I want to see the inverted coaster one more time. And just quickly checking if I didn't forget any lighting anywhere. No, the entire park is lit up. So that's good. Alright, so yeah, just because I really like it, I'm just going to follow along with this coaster one more time. Let's take a different perspective though. I've been in that perspective for quite a while now. Alright, let's follow this thing around. So not every part of the track is quite smooth. I also made some slight adjustments off screen as well. So for this turn over here, which is going through, I increased the banking a little bit to make it a little bit more like a mini Immelman. I don't know what Phantasialand calls their inversion on Black Mamba, but it's a little bit more like that element at the start of Black Mamba. And this transition is just so incredibly smooth. I really, really like the new autocomplete feature. And then through the loop, it's not super fast, but I think the speed is generally quite realistic, at least more realistic than the little Wild Mouse coaster over there, because that thing is actually quite fast. And let's have this thing do its thing. Alright, get on, people. So yeah, this thing is just so strange. You get on at the bottom here, so it's kind of almost looking like a super wide drop tower, if you will. And then it also does the same thing where it goes up and it starts rotating. But then the tower itself with that massive counterweight just starts toppling back and forth, which is... it must be an engineering feat, honestly. These things are really impressive when it comes to a technical perspective, I would say. But yeah, really cool things. But if you're at the bottom of one of these rotations, then you're hanging into those restraints like crazy. Super weird. So we've got that. I've got a pretty bad frame rate, I should also say. Honestly, I do notice it's getting a little bit less good because of the recording, but at this point I'm honestly noticing a lag or a slight frame rate drop, I should say, myself as well. And this park has a lot of foliage and stuff like that, so it's definitely understandable, and it's not quite dipping much below 30, but it is definitely noticeable, so that's something to keep in mind. And I don't have the best PC. I have like a GTX 970 and an i5 processor, I still think, though I'm not entirely sure. It might be an i7 as well. But it's something to keep in mind. If you do add a lot of scenery into the game, you know, for campaign mode, it'll be more or less fine. Like, you might get a bit of a frame rate drop at the end of the campaign, or at the end of each map, I should say. But if you're building a really big sandbox park, I can really imagine this being an issue. So, speaking of which, I've got some requests to build a sandbox park, but I have to say, as long as I'm going through the campaign mode, I don't really want to start on a campaign or on a sandbox map, so I'm gonna stick to the campaign for now. But yeah, that'll be it for Coral Caldera. I don't think any of these coasters works really well as a blueprint, considering that they're quite terrain conforming. But I'll see if there's anything else that I'll upload. But it's quite a different case from Western Roundup, I think. So for now, let's say goodbye to this park. That should be fine 5 minutes ago, that's alright. I didn't really change anything. And let's check out what we've got next. And I think it's that big old group of tropical islands. So there we go. The trophy is the lighthouse. That's pretty fitting, I would say. And then all of the clouds are going to clear. And yeah, there we go. Oh, no, not quite. It's actually different from what I expected. So we're going through the Mystic Desert. And if I remember correctly, then this is probably Mystic Oasis, which is, this is my personal favorite scenario actually that I've made. The thing doesn't show off entirely. There you go, this is what you get. Basically the park is just this small oasis in the middle of a desert. And then the other is Nova Labs, which, I mean, considering, you know, how the order of the parks goes, I should probably do Mystic Oasis first. So yeah, next episode will be all about Mystic Oasis. Bye guys.